do right here is go back. Way back. Back into time.
We can rebuild him. We have the technology.
Celebrating 20 years of New England Championship Wrestling. This is the Regeneration Podcast.
And now, here are your hosts, Sheldon Goldberg, Joe Matarazzo, and Kevin Castro.
Welcome, everyone. It is time once again for the NECW ReGeneration Podcast, celebrating 20 years of New England Championship Wrestling. Sheldon Goldberg here, joined as always by my two illustrious and wonderful co-hosts. Let me introduce them to you individually. First, former wrestling referee, former co-host of NECW TV and the Mouthpiece Wrestling Show with myself, the one and only Joe Matarazzo. Hey, Joe.
How we doing?
All right.
How are you?
Better now that you're here. And
there you go.
Last but certainly not least, former booker, former manager, still manages now and then. I hear he manages pretty well, actually, but anyway, that's another story for another day. Anyway, yes. And talent coordinator for New England Championship Wrestling, my right hand and very close, dear, longtime personal friend, Mr. Kevin Castro. How art thou?
Good evening. Tired, but you know something? My love for the business, my love for you guys, my love for the fans just keeps me pushing through.
All right. Well, we've got a lot of...
Rounding out this six-man team right here.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about this week, a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. We've got two matches to go over from the 20th anniversary collection. We're going to take a look first at a match from April 17th of 2009. The NECW Tag Team Champions at the time, the Crown Jewels, taking on the team of Mike Bennett. Yes, that Mike Bennett. And Guy Alexander. And then from there, it's to November 10th, 2010. A man known by many names. Currently, he's known as Ivar of the Viking Raiders. Then he was known as Handsome Johnny Hayes, taking on Ryan Bisbal in the last leg of the Toxic Waltz from November 10th of 2010. We've got a bonus match for you this week. Yes, we have a bonus match. It's a match for the NECW Heavyweight Championship. Champion Max Bauer takes on, in singles competition, one half of the NECW Tag Team Champions, Darling Damon. So a double dose of Darling Damon this week. And we've got a lot of other stuff to talk about. We've got some fan questions. We've got a lot of news to go over. But let's go over the matches first. Let's start with the Crown Jewels versus Mike Bennett and Guy Alexander from April 17th of 2009. This match took place at the South Middle School in Brockton, Massachusetts. Super hot crowd. And Joe, you were not around.
I was there.
You were there, okay.
No, I was there.
Okay.
I was interviewing the principal at the time, Kevin Caro.
Yes.
At the time, and man, what a night that was! To put that whole thing together, that crowd was hot. Those kids were going out returning bottles and cans to earn enough money to buy tickets to go to the show, and we raised so much money that night for them. They did that. Every kid in that school got a hot lunch for the entire year, paid for. And they still made enough money to take trips to the Museum of Science, to I believe it was Plymouth Plantation, the aquarium. So they started off with $400 in their cash fund, and by the time they were done with us for this one night, they were able to do all that for that middle school. Those guys, Dennis, I can't remember Dennis's last name, the assistant principal, and Kevin. And if I'm not mistaken, Kevin moved on, and Dennis, I think, took over at one point. Two terrific guys. Loved those kids. Those kids respected them, and man, that crowd was hot. It sounded like world class. Yeah, absolutely. Kevin, we're going to start with Kevin because Kevin wasn't there. So let me ask Kevin his impressions of the match.
Right off the bat, when Guy and Mike came out, I mean, Guy was just full of energy and really got the crowd going. I did like the fact that between the face work and the heel work, they went 7 minutes beyond 7 minutes before they even laid hands on each other.
Yes.
And the crowd was eaten out of the palm of their hands. It definitely was clear that Darling Damon was way more committed and way more comfortable with the gimmick than Bad Boy Jason was. And what's great about what Damon too is that he can work.
Oh yeah.
You know, it wasn't just a gimmick. It wasn't just, you know, quote unquote cheap heat or anything like that. When he got in there, he could work with anybody. I really liked there was a running knee side suplex by the Crown Jewels. And the finish was an extremely old school finish.
Yeah. Which you could get away with that crowd. And they totally ate it up. It was the sound of the crowd was just amazing. And
that's always a great feeling too when you're putting on a show like that, you know, when you're putting the show together, when you get that reaction, because a lot of times when I'm going over a match in my head and I'm you know, we put the matches together and we're trying to plan it out, you'll kind of put the pieces together as to how you think the crowd is going to react. Right. And when you get that exact reaction, it's just a wonderful feeling.
So this was pre-Ring of Honor for Mike Bennett. Mike had a lot of charisma, great talent. Obviously had a great body. When I first met Mike Bennett, when he first started working for me, he weighed maybe $150 if he put 2 bricks in his pocket.
Wow.
Yeah, when I first met him, he was...
Yeah, he was a real skinny mini. Better living through chemistry for Mike Bennett, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but he got himself in tremendous condition. He and Guy were both very motivated to try to get a spot someplace. Of course, for Mike, it did happen. Guy was not so fortunate. Guy Alexander had been a ring announcer for us. He'd done commentary on the internet TV at one point. So Guy had filled a lot of roles. Good guy. It was nice to see him live his dream as a wrestler, at least in that period. They were a pretty good tag team. I think that had they stuck around longer, there could have been a really good program between them and the Jewels. That would have been a really good tag team program. I think in the case of both of them, they both had their eyes on bigger and better things, and this was just a stop along the way, although they did have multiple matches for us. They didn't stick around that long, but they did have more than one appearance. So, interesting stuff there. The dynamic of Jason and Damon. Now, normally they would have had Tony Ulysses there as their manager. Tony was not there on this occasion. He was, I think I said in the commentary that he was vacationing in Trinidad, which is actually a shoot. Yeah. That's where his family roots are. But what a great act they were. Like you were saying, Damon was much more committed to the gimmick than Jason was. And that was eventually the undoing of the Crown Jewels, at least the original version of the Crown Jewels. We actually tried in 2011 to recreate the Crown Jewels with 2 different guys, with Jimmy Malonis and Ilya Markopoulos.
No, I know him. Yep.
Yeah, and that didn't work. It's hard to take a gimmick that somebody else originated and somebody else really invested in, and to put 2 different guys in it. It's like the fake Razor and the fake Diesel, you know?
Right.
It's that type of thing.
The new Midnight Express?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, no, actually, the Midnight Express, they were 2 good versions.
You mean Bodacious Bo and Holly?
Yes.
Is that who you're talking? Yes.
That was my reference.
Okay. All right.
I had a feeling. I knew where you were going too, though, Sheldon.
Yes.
As long as you had one of the original members, when Stan Lane stepped in, you know, that worked. I think that worked even better than with Condrey and Eaton. Right. I think Stan Lane and Eaton were a much better version.
But you know, the Jewels were one of those acts that, while they were heels, the people loved them.
It's because they were so good,
and they were so over the top.
Oh, and Damon was so hard to work with. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that he tested you. And Kevin, I know you've done interviews with them before, especially Tony Ulysses and Damon. Those 2, the harder it was to make it look like you weren't uncomfortable while trying to act like you were uncomfortable with his antics whether he was eating a banana or, like we were talking about, Sheldon, the dill pickle, while you're in the middle of trying to interview with him, and the more over the top he got,
right,
the further he pushed the envelope to try to get you, and like you said, total commitment to the gimmick.
And it's interesting because when they came into NECW, they didn't have a team name. They had an idea for what they wanted to do, but they had none of the finish of it. I was the one that actually gave them the name, the Crown Jewels, and
perfect.
Put some of the touches in them. I gave them like a catchphrase for Tony Ulysses, like "Nobody fools with my jewels."
Right.
And just try to add the little touches to it so that in promos and could become a more marketable act, and it was probably the most marketable act I think we ever created.
Yeah, I always had fun working with Tony, doing the promos and things like that. He's so much fun.
Right. So, Mike Bennett, your memories of Mike Bennett, Kevin?
I met him very briefly when he first started. I want to say, I don't remember, I almost want to say it was Brockton again, at an ice skating rink. I was ring announcing for Yankee Pro. And yeah, it was just kind of a one-off. He grew up in the town next to me because he was in Carver. I grew up in Plymouth, the mean streets of West Plymouth, Massachusetts, as I'd like to say.
Yes, indeed.
How did you make it out?
Yeah.
Well, we used to build Damon as from the mean streets of Provincetown.
Right. The happiest streets in the town.
Mike was just just looked like the regular, teenage kid training to be a wrestler.
Right.
And to see like the humble beginnings there,
right,
and what he drove himself to become is a huge accomplishment.
Right. He started with Bob Evans.
I think he was up with top Yankee Pro and then moved on with Bob. But I would be willing to say that he's probably the biggest thing to come out of Carver, Massachusetts.
All right.
There's nothing else.
Other than ocean spray. Yeah.
Right. I know that Mike spent a lot of time with the late Steve Bradley, which is where he might have gotten his physique from. Injectable. Because a lot of those guys... Now, a lot of those guys Steve had turned a lot of those guys onto the gas. Him and Brandon Locke and Guy, I believe. Guy, too, had his run with the sauce, so to speak. So,
among other things.
Yeah. But, they wanted to make it. They were willing to do whatever it took to become successful. I know that they made a couple of trips out to Ohio Valley to try to catch on, and that didn't work out for them. But they did the drives and paid the price, and for Mike, eventually it worked out. Mike was talented. I didn't see it at first when he first started working for NECW, and Bob brought him in. I didn't see it. I thought, what's this skinny kid doing here?
Right.
But at this point, as I say, had they stuck around, had they made a commitment to NECW for a little while, they could have had a great program with the Jewels. Bennett certainly could have been a title holder. Absolutely had the charisma and the work and the look, obviously, to be a top star with NECW. But as I say, he had his sights set on other things in other places. So...
I met Mike back when I was refereeing. I must have refereed a dozen or so of his matches then. Right. And this is when he was starting to... Now, the physique was starting to come into play.
Right.
And his charisma started getting as big as the physique did. And it just kept getting better. And I think he got more confidence with his size. And his personality started coming out a lot more. And he used to play it up to the crowd. I mean, he could never play a heel at the time. He was too good looking of a guy. He was too over with the crowd to be a heel at the time. Right. So he only played babyface. Once he started, and then of course once he started becoming, a heel, he was off the charts at that point.
Right.
Then that's when he started really learning how to work. But and all the successes that he's come through, he's been through a lot of struggles the last few years. He has had to overcome an awful lot. And you know what? I think he's got himself back on track. He's become a dad. He's a devoted dad and family man. I respect him a lot for that. Right. And he's an inspiration to a lot of people. And I think I wish him all the best, man. He was always a great guy and always had very nice and easy, pleasant to deal with. And I wish him nothing but success.
Right. Likewise. So from there we go to November 10th, 2010. Handsome Johnny Hayes, as he was known at the time, taking on Ryan Bisbal in the last segment of an event called the Toxic Waltz, which was a PWF staple for a number of years. The Toxic Waltz was essentially a gauntlet match. So two guys start, and whoever wins goes on. They trot on another guy, and the
loser picks the next opponent for the guy who won.
Exactly. So
would that really give anyone an advantage? Just out of my own curiosity.
I don't. You know what? I was there during the inception of this match because it started in Mayhem, way back when. So I was there during the inception and actually worked on a couple of them. Building those matches together, and it was a way of, because it was one of those. Okay, you beat me, well, go beat him. Let's see if you can beat this guy then. And that's kind of how it started, and it was just a way of like one-upping the next guy. All right, you think you're so cool, you just beat me. Take him on now.
But conceptually, wouldn't that have worked better if you didn't announce who was going to be in the match? You know what I mean?
Yes.
But,
I mean, from a promoting standpoint, no, because if you don't know who's going to be there, then... But I would think that for the gimmick, if you weren't sure who could be brought out, it just brings that, because I mean, if you have a list of 6 people, that one of those 6 is going to be coming out, so you could in theory prepare for it.
Well,
just my thought.
Yeah, the Toxic Waltz as a booking device was used to elevate somebody, much like the Iron 8. See, the Iron 8 was an NECW creation, and the Toxic Waltz was a PWF creation. So, much like the bigger companies, we had a couple of different signature events throughout the year. 4 of them, actually. PWF conventions were Genesis, which was their anniversary show, and the Toxic Waltz. And mine were Birthday Bash, or just Bash, which later we changed it to, and the Iron 8. So, you put all those things together, you meld those things together, and now you've got a way of taking people and moving them up and down the card in an effective way. So this match also was the very last match of the joint venture between myself and the PWF crew. That's the night that it came to an end, and that's the last match. So that was a difficult night for me emotionally, because I had put so much into that joint venture between the two parties, and it was just coming crashing down. So that was tough. It was very, very tough mentally to get through.
Was the event itself extra long?
No, it wasn't extra. I think that it ended reasonably on time.
Okay. Yeah. And the only reason I asked is when I was watching the match, the second that there was the 3 count, the fans got up.
Right.
And I got the impression, because I knew that Handsome Johnny wrestled over an hour.
Right.
So
hour and 12 minutes.
Hour and 12 minutes.
I guess that there was already, the full event, and then and the people were just exhausted, and that it might have been late. But
well, there weren't so many matches, but you to go an hour or so without a break between matches, that's enough to wear people out. Anytime you have it in the old days of wrestling, when you would have hour-long draws between the champion and the challenger, that was a typical thing, not every month thing, but it was not an unusual thing. But in independent wrestling, it is an unusual thing for anything to go for an hour or hour plus. Right. The Iron 8, 45 minutes or sometimes more if there was an overtime. It was a tough night.
Had to be.
Yeah, I mean, to have put all that work and all that effort into something and to see it disintegrate wasn't easy.
I didn't realize that it was the last night when I watched this, because I wasn't there.
I didn't realize it either.
I had exited by then. And I'll tell you what, I didn't know until you told me just before we started the podcast that you had actually let me in on knowing that was the last night. And for you to hold it together and do everything that you did and put it over just like you normally would, I mean, that just shows your professionalism. And it came through. So without knowing that, you would have never known unless you told us.
Well, I didn't have a plan B at that moment. I didn't know what was going to come next. But I knew that there would be something that came next. I just didn't know when or what, or in what form or whatever. You know, we still had television to do. We had television through the end of the calendar year. If you remember, Joe, you came and helped me with the last couple of weeks of television because they just said, screw it, we're not going to do anything.
I did.
You know, it's up to you.
Yep.
You and Brian Nadeau, who produced and directed the shows, it's up to you guys to do it. We're not going to touch it. But you have to put in a commercial for our debut PWF show.
Right.
Yeah.
And Brian's one of the unsung heroes of NECW as well.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
But definitely.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
You know, Brian was a pivotal piece of that whole puzzle.
Absolutely. And you got to remember that, you know, we had done a year's worth of television. And while it didn't quite work out the way we had intended it to work out, it was supposed to be on Comcast Sportsnet. It ended up on Comcast On Demand. But still, we did a year's worth of television. We were seen in a lot of homes. And the on-demand shows did attract what the network told us was a very healthy audience. And had we been on the Comcast Sportsnet itself, I don't know the results would have been that much different, but it would have been more accessible. It would have been easier for people to watch. It might have made a difference. Right. Who knows? It's just conjecture at this point as to how it might have ended up. But, you know, as events would happen, PWF started up, and without myself and Paul Richard and the marketing and the promotion and just the volume of things, the non-show things that I would be doing, without anybody else to do them, it fell apart.
Right.
And it was pretty predictable that it was going to fall apart. But what happened with us is, you know, within a couple of years, we were back on television. So, and we had nothing. You know, PWF took the money, they took the equipment, they took everything, they took the talent. Within a year or so, it was over. And we just kept going. So, you know, it became very apparent who was the straw that stirred the drink in that situation.
I was just going to say, you know, that one of the biggest learning curves that I saw during that time was making the transition from us doing the internet TV show to then going to conventional television, and how it was shot, how it was done, how it was timed, and how you had to do things. And I've never seen anything more precise. It was extremely stressful, trying to keep to the times, trying to jump. You know, the people that would be at a show that would tape for 4 weeks in one night,
right,
didn't realize things were we were doing things out of sequence. So our sheets, and I just found all my sheets because I've got them all from every show that we did, and to look at them and see, okay, we're shooting an angle this night that isn't going to be seen for 3 weeks. So we've got to talk about this, and then the very next match is going to be shown the very next week on TV. So now we had to juggle these things and know how to make them flow, and of course guys like us, Sheldon, Kevin, you saw it, you had to do it. Myself doing interviews in the back, we had to shoot back, you know, and you know, you're pitching it back and forth to each other. That was, people don't realize what it takes to do that. And I think the ones that think that they can just go ahead and say, I can do this because I can get myself a ring and I can hire some guys and I can they don't have a clue what they're doing.
No.
Not a clue. And we had guys that had already done it on television. Guys like Paul Richard that already knew how all this stuff was done like that. You've already did it when you were with Tony Rumble. And so you saw how it was done.
Right.
And we had guys that didn't understand how it was going to work like that. And I think it frustrated them to the point where they basically self-sabotaged themselves into what ended up happening.
Well, it was fear.
It
was fear. It
wasn't easy.
No, it wasn't easy, and they wanted the acclaim that came with it, but they didn't want to pay the price. They were afraid to pay that price. If you remember, Joe, originally when we went on the air with Comcast On Demand, the show was an hour long. About halfway through, they just said, screw this, we're only going to do a half hour.
Yep.
Even though we were paying for an hour of television.
For an hour,
they threw the half hour away. They just threw it away because they didn't want the pressure of having to produce all that television.
And there was an hour-long infomercial.
Yeah.
So much stuff we could have put into. I know. It was so frustrating. So to see you being able to hold it together in the last match is a testament to, like I said, your professionalism and what you were able to accomplish.
Well, like I say, the show was going to go on one way or another. You can't sacrifice the quality of what you're doing just because of other people. You've got to represent. But
absolutely.
Let's talk about the match itself, and let's talk about the guys, because we talked about Ryan Bisbal last week. What a great talent he was. He was experienced and so forth. Handsome Johnny had just come back. This was really his comeback from having broken his back in 2 places. He had won the Iron 8 previous to this. This sort of capped off his comeback by wrestling for an hour and 12 minutes and winning the Toxic Waltz. This has got to be the bravest, most incredible story of a local wrestler ever. For a guy to break his back in 2 places and not give up, to come back and to not just, perform at a high level on this level, but to work for pretty much every major company and be successful. What a story. And
absolutely.
What a great kid, even though he was very closely tied to chaotic wrestling. And one of the things that we would have issue with now and then is guys who would sort of put them over us, even though they were supposed to be working for us. It was very clear that they came first. Todd never dogged it on anything that he did with us. He always gave 100%. He always performed at a high level. My favorite Handsome Johnny story is the first year that we did the Hot Dog Safari, which was a charity event that was produced by, now it's the Phantom Gourmet guys, but their father, Eddie Andelman, did a charity event for cystic fibrosis every year called the Hot Dog Safari. It was at Suffolk Downs, and they have all these different companies that make hot dogs, and you paid one admission price, all the food you could eat, and the entertainment was us. We would put on a live show that day, and that's what the people were doing to look at when they weren't filling their faces with hot dogs. So they decided that they were going to have a hot dog eating contest. And they wanted us to provide some talent to be in the hot dog eating contest. Well, Todd was the first guy to raise his hand and said, I'll do it. And, this is a kid that had always struggled with his weight. He was always trying to lose weight and get in better shape. And he was in the middle of dieting and trying to get his weight down. And, of course, he's the first guy to volunteer to do the hot dog eating contest. And he won it. And who came in second? Nikki Rocks. There's a joke in there somewhere, but I won't go there. But anyway. So it just goes to show you what kind of a guy Handsome Johnny is, and I'm so happy that he's had the success that he's had. He's recovering from an injury right now, but I mean, really, when you watch that match or that portion of the match, what a performance!
Yeah,
he's full tilt the whole way, and
so agile.
Right there with it. Yes, for a big kid,
and he was small then compared to how he is now, and he's still just as agile.
And you figure he was already an hour into the match too.
That's
and you know what? It was his pacing, though. If you watch the pacing of the match between him and Ryan Bisbal, everything they did meant something. There was no wasted movement, and that's how you can last that long. To go an hour and 12 minutes, every time they grabbed each other, there was a purpose behind it. Everything made sense. And when it finally ended with the pin, that spinning kick, you knew it. That was perfect. It was done very, very well for him. And like you said, a perfect victory for a perfect comeback.
Kevin,
I wasn't aware of that backstory until just now.
Right.
I know that it was mentioned during the commentary, but I didn't realize that was the last event. I didn't realize that he broke his back in 2 places and still went on to wrestle over an hour. It's gives me a different perspective now looking at it. Like, had I known that when I first watched it, I think it would have hit me in the feels, so to speak.
At the end of that night, given everything that was going on in the background, I felt badly because I didn't think that what was going to happen from that point on would really benefit the talent as much as what we were doing as a group. But nonetheless, Handsome Johnny had a lot of memorable matches in NECW. He must have wrestled Brandon Locke about 30 times.
Right.
And they always had a good match. I thought this match was notable not just because of the backstory of what was going on in the background of it, but just the story of him coming back from breaking his back in 2 places. And I think that the story of that accomplishment for him really, really says and speaks to the quality of a performer, the quality of an athlete he is, and the quality of a person, because he was a quality guy. And he never gave us anything less than his best. So, mad respect for Handsome Johnny. And was glad to have him as part of NECW. Even though a lot of these guys were out of the chaotic camp, and that was where their loyalty was. You get guys like this who give everything they have, and you got to respect them. Moving on from here, we have a bonus match this week, and that match is between Max Bauer, who at the time was the NECW Heavyweight Champion, as he takes on none other than our good friend Darling Damon from September 19th, 2009. And this was as we were gearing up for television. And booking-wise, what we were doing here was we were giving Max Bauer a bunch of one-off title wins before we got into a big program with him and anybody else. It was a way to build him up as champion as we headed into television.
So what we're going to do is take you to that match, and then we'll discuss it on the other side.
Welcome back to NECW TV, and thank you, Matt Dominguez, as we are set for NECW Triple Crown Championship action, a champion versus champion match.
This is unprecedented for NECW TV.
Darling Damon, the challenger this week, one half of the NECW Tag Team Champions. Conspicuous by his absence is the fabulous one, Tony Ulysses.
Yeah, but he still managed to put together quite a scene here, getting Darling Damon a shot and Max Bauer.
This is actually an interesting situation, Joe, because according to NECW bylaws, no man can hold more than one championship at the same time. So should Darling Damon be the victor tonight, he would have a very interesting choice tonight. Would he continue to be one half of the NECW Tag Team Champions, or would he be the Triple Crown Champion? But of course, Max Bauer, the NECW Triple Crown Champion, is going to try to make that a moot point right now. And there he is. The man who is now the longest reigning champion in NECW history. Max Bauer breaking the record previously held by Maverick Wild for the longest title reign in NECW history.
And it's an unbelievable feat. And now it's Darling Damon's turn to try and stop the streak.
Bad Boy Jason helping the Darling One with his attire here. I used to have a shower curtain that looked like that. Darling One removing his robe now.
Now, choice. This thing was handmade and cost. And one there. That's a lot of weight to carry around here.
Bad Boy Jason admonishing Victoria, the ring attendant here, about the cost of that robe.
Did I hear him right? $10,000?
I don't want to shop where he does. I got that shower curtain for about $8.
I think he should get those the lenses on his glasses rechecked.
Maybe. The Triple Crown is the only title on the line in this championship match this week on NECW TV. Rob Tuttle can't even see his nails. Why does he need the manicure?
I don't know. I don't know what he's talking about. Doesn't make any sense.
Are you ready, sweetheart? Oh, I'm ready, baby. What do you think, pal? Because I got pretty long hair, and I'm a beautiful man.
Bella sounded from this matchup. Little trash talk on the part of the Darling One. Bauer, of course, not going to back up from Darling Damon. The Darling One heads to the outside.
I love TV.
Oh, come on.
It isn't my favorite broadcast team. The one, the only, the legendary wrestling historian himself, Mr. Sheldon Goldberg, and his little sidekick here, Joey Matarazzo. The two of you guys on an open mic sound like a couple of cackling hens.
Liberace is rolling over in his grave at this moment as Max Bauer gives chase to the Darling One. The Darling One heading to the inside. Bauer chases in after him. Over the top goes the Darling One. Runs right into the fist of Max Bauer.
My mic smells funny now.
That's Avon calling.
I think so.
Max Bauer sizing up Darling Damon. Damon,
no!
A big smooch.
Please, no.
Max Bauer right back to him.
Well, he just got a smooch with the knuckles.
Yeah. The Darling One tossed over the top.
Oh, boy.
Uh-oh. Damon from behind. Double sledge on the NECW Triple Crown champion. Head first into the steel ring step.
Jeez.
Damon now. Up for the ride. Oh, my goodness. Oh, he's going to put those jewels in a steel setting. Uh-oh. We're talking head-to-head action here.
Like bookends. Oh!
As the champion takes care of both crown jewels. Bad Boy Jason riding that rail like he likes it.
Wow.
Darling Damon in a world of pain on the outside. Max Bauer now in control. Grabs a handful of the voluminous locks of Darling Damon. Wait a minute. Oh, big chop by that young man in the front row. Oh, God. He's giving the audience their licks. Oh, wait.
Oh.
The birthday boy right here is going to get a shot at the Darling one. Oh, my. Oh, this is going to do some damage.
Oh,
no. I've heard of birthday wax, but usually they go in the other direction.
Yeah! Wow! What a shot!
There's a birthday present that young man won't forget.
He will never forget that one.
Young Alex here in the front row, 8 years old today. Bad Boy Jason holding the ankle of the champion is Darling Damon with an elbow right to the back of the head.
You son of a bitch!
Damon now, incensed. Damon ramming the head of Max Bauer into the canvas.
You want to humiliate me? A bunch of little kids to hit me, huh?
Oh. A little swish and dish there by Darling Damon.
A little more swish than dish.
I know. I think that was what they call a hissy fit.
Now I get it.
Bauer in trouble here on the. Give Darling Damon his due. He's softening up. The NECW Triple Crown champion. Here's a cover and a 2 count only.
Boy, I got to give it to Damon. He's really taking it as a champ.
Knee right to the kidney area of the NECW Triple Crown champion. A stomp right to the solar plexus of Max Bauer. Damon not backing up one bit from the NECW Triple Crown champion. And a back elbow has Max Bauer slumped in the corner. Bad Boy Jason right there on the outside. Look at the ring move.
Wow.
Damon getting up ahead of steam, but Bauer meets him with a back elbow. Jason with a handful of the tights. Distracting.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, look at this. Damon just pulled the straps of Bauer's ring gear down and started firing away. What a move by Darling Damon. And a cover right here. And only 2.
Oh, Max is in some trouble here.
Well, Darling Damon is a veteran. He's been around for quite a while. Most of that time in Provincetown, but he's been around.
But he's still been around, absolutely.
Damon now pushing that second rope. Measuring Bauer. Here he comes. Bauer grabs him. Bauer has him right by the neck. Sends him right into the corner. Bauer charges in.
Ooh.
Big clothesline. Bauer sends Damon to the opposite side. Damon takes the buckle hard. Here comes Bauer. And another big splash. Bauer off the ropes.
Wow.
Levels Darling Damon. Back elbow. Drops one half of the NECW Tag Team Champions. Off the ropes goes Damon. Bauer has him upstairs. Drops him. Side slam right there and a cover.
Oh, wait a minute.
Jason on the apron. Referee Rob Tuttle gets up to tell him to get out of the way. A little debate going on between Tuttle and Bad Boy Jason. Damon now from behind. That's his favorite position. Bauer rolls him over. Cover right here. And only two. Oh, Jason went flying. Elbow. Oh! Right in the face. Right in the mush. Here's a cover. This is going to do it. Oh, yes. The NECW Triple Crown Champion Max Bauer retaining the title over Darling Damon this week on NECW TV. The Darling one giving the champion a run for his money, but not quite enough to take the title from the enforcer Max Bauer.
Not tonight.
Once again, your winner, the NECW Triple Crown Champion, Max Bauer. We've got more NECW TV to come. Don't go away. It comes your way right after this. So, you were calling this with me. Let's get your impressions first.
What I loved about this match was this threw me back to the old TBS NWA days when Ric Flair would fight Ricky Morton,
right, or
Hawk, or somebody. It was a tag team guy against the heavyweight champ, and maybe it was a tag champ at the time, but it was a great way of showcasing the skills. And you know what, Damon was a tag team specialist at the time, so he was actually going to be fighting from underneath, trying to get on, even though he was the heel. The advantage was going to go to Max, and the way that they worked each other. And again, like we talked about, Kevin, you said it in the beginning of the show. Damon can work, man. He can work, and he can hide a lot of shortcomings of other people. And he was able to make Max look really good with a lot of stuff. Just his registering of pain and when he got chopped, and even to the point where he went outside. I mean, he was selling as a heel, really selling. To the point where even when the kids, when Max allowed the kids to start, getting involved and chopping them, he even sold for the kids. Making those kids, putting those kids over. It was fantastic. I love the story that you told about champions not being able to hold multiple titles.
Right.
So now you just put a bit of intrigue in. What happens if he actually wins? Is he going to stay on? Is he going to go forward as the champ? I thought it was dynamite. It was just a great, fun match. Amazing how good Damon was in it. And just how good he was in everything he did, and made Max look like $1 million.
That was old school booking in the way of putting those two together. One half of the tag team champions against the heavyweight champion. That's old school booking.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah,
and it works.
Yeah. Sure does. Kevin, what were your impressions? Because you're looking at this with fresh eyes.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, Damon's commitment to the bit was just admirable. You know, just the way that he went out there, stalling again. You know, there was a little bit of time before they even locked up. Like Joe was saying, the chops from the crowd, I absolutely loved it. I will fully admit that I laughed that the younger kid got a better chop than the older kid.
It was his birthday.
Yes, it really was his birthday.
Can you imagine how he must have felt too when he was like, after that the small kid chops, and it was a good chop, and this other kid's like, oh, here's my moment, and hope he's doing well though.
They were, those kids, by the way, that family would come to all the shows. The kids used to dress up as the different wrestlers.
Yeah. The NECW wrestlers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just watching these matches, you see a lot of the same people in the crowd.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people that were going when we were, you know, able to run shows. You know, it just shows that loyalty.
Right.
I as Joe was saying, I really liked that concept about how the champion can only hold one belt. I kind of was hoping that Jason was going to be looking for his own best interests during that. I think that might have been tough to get across to the live crowd without explaining that. But that was just one of the things that was going through my head. I really enjoyed when Damon pulled the straps around Max's arms and just unloaded on him in the corner. I thought that was pretty innovative. And the finish there, that boot looked a little stiff-ski.
Yeah.
We should have Damon on and ask him.
That's right. We got to have Damon on at some point.
Yes.
He really is. You know, it's funny. You think about this. All the people that you've seen in this series thus far, who is the most underrated? And I think you got to put Damon in that category. When we talked about Arion was NECW champion at one point. He won an Iron 8 at another point. But, boy, Damon's right up there. You know, what a talent. You talk about just a quality worker who could really get over with an audience. And, Max Bauer was one of the most popular champions that NECW ever had. And it's interesting because when he first started, he had a mohawk. And his gimmick was he was the Mohawked Enforcer.
That's right.
Then he had an issue with his job, and they made him get rid of the mohawk. I guess he was working at an Olive Garden, and they told him he couldn't have a mohawk or he'd have no job. So he got rid of the mohawk, and then at that point, instead of really standing out, he just looked like a big, tall kid. Interesting that Max was able to get himself signed to NXT at one point, and while his career was cut short due to injury, no, you look at him at this point, you know, he's not very muscular. He's just a big dude, and he's charismatic. You know, the people were certainly behind him, and he was a popular champion. He was a draw. You know, if you look at his, you know, body-wise, he wasn't anything special. He's just a big, tall kid.
Right.
You know, again, this is a situation where charisma overpowered his physical attributes, which I find to be interesting. There are some workers that are like that. I mean, you know, you think about guys over the years. Tommy Rich is one that falls into that category, who, you know, physically was not terribly impressive, but charisma, you know, for days, and was one of the most popular wrestlers in the NWA, to the point they had to give him a very brief run with the NWA title.
Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah.
Even some of the smaller guys.
Kevin, what were your impressions of Max as a worker?
I mean, he was a solid worker. Like you said, he was extremely charismatic. The crowd seemed to be really into him. I'm not too familiar with him. It's just from some of the things. I think I might have seen him at a show once, possibly in person. But yeah, like you were saying, you know, he was able to make that connection, and sometimes that's more important than being the best ring technician.
Right. You know, charisma counts for a lot. History is littered with guys who are charismatic but lousy workers. Not that Max was a lousy worker, but I don't know if...
But you only need... If you get the... Look at Hogan. Look at Cena.
Yeah.
You only need a couple of moves.
Right.
And that's really all you need. If you can get that crowd going, that's all that matters.
There was a guy in the 70s who wrestled in different territories. He wrestled a lot for the original Sheik in Detroit. Tex McKenzie. Tex McKenzie was over as over ever gets. And as a worker, he was the drizzling shits. but he was just popular. People just loved Tex McKenzie. There's guys like that. I mean, it takes all different types to make a good wrestling promotion. It takes all different types of characters to make a great movie or a great play or a great book. And, it's wrestling, as I say, has numerous examples of guys that, physically may not have been impressive, but, had the charisma and had that dynamic that made them popular. And I think Max is one of the people that falls into that category. Damon, he was such a great talent that I thought we needed to see him in a different prism, not just as a tag team wrestler, but as a single. So that's why I chose that match as I ran across it and wanted to bring it to folks. I know that that's a particular favorite of certain of our fans, Jim Parker, whose son was the one that whose birthday it was, who chopped out. I know he's been looking for that match for years, so I just made him a happy man by finding that. But
still no Tony Ulysses there, though.
No Tony Ulysses there, but yeah. Well, I'm sure that we'll run across some footage with Tony Ulysses at some point.
There we go.
We'll be able to talk about Tony Ulysses.
That should make me blush.
Yes. A lot of people. Kevin, we've got a listener question. Why don't we get to that?
Yeah, it's a repeat guest, so to speak. Okay. It says here, hello, this is Rob Skahan once again. I want to pose a new question or two, if that is all right. I know I asked a question about 2 weeks ago, but it's not that often that a fan can pose questions about behind-the-scenes work to the owner of a company as good as NECW. One question
that'll get you over with me.
Right?
Flattery will get you everywhere.
One question I have, has Sheldon ever had a fan cross the line at one of his shows and assault a wrestler or referee and actually had to revoke the fan's privilege from coming to NECW wrestling shows? What brings this question to my mind is that back in 2012, I watched a wrestling show in Bridgewater where there was several fans that were extremely rude and unruly with their language and actions. This was not an NECW wrestling show, but another league that I honestly can't remember the name of. His second question is, whatever happened to Violent Flame? She was a really talented wrestler. Thank you again, Rob Skahan.
Okay, well, thank you, Rob, for the questions. To answer your first question, we have never, fortunately for us, we've never had an event where a fan crossed the line and got involved in the matches. NECW, by and large, attracted a family audience, families with kids, for the most part. So, we didn't really get that unruly crowd. There were very few venues that we played in that sold alcohol. Back in the days when we ran in Good Time Emporium, they sold alcohol, but we never had any issues there. And Good Time Emporium could be a rough place. There were people getting stabbed in there and drug deals going on and so on and so forth. But we always drew a family crowd, and we never had any issues. That was one of the attractions for us with Good Times, is that we attracted a good crowd, and we reflected well. We got good publicity for that venue, so we were fortunate in that we never really had any incidents with fans crossing the line or getting out of line during the shows. I think I may have had one or two incidents after a show where a fan may have been abusive to another fan and we had to calm them down, but no, we never had anything like that. Thank goodness. We were blessed in that department. And the second question is, whatever happened to Violet Flame? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Violet Flame has retired from wrestling. She lives in the New England area. She is actually the vice president of a company that makes greeting cards, of all things. So she is doing very, very well for herself. She's a great person. She is married, of course, to former NECW wrestler, ring announcer, NECW TV play-by-play announcer, Strangler Steve King. They both live in the New England area, and they're both doing very, very well. So thank you for those questions. Please feel free to ask more questions if you like. And for those of you who have questions of your own that you'd like to ask us, email them to regeneration@gmail.com, and we would be happy to answer those questions on this very program. So it's been a big week for news this week. And why don't we start by talking a little bit about the sad passing of Pat Patterson. Pat Patterson died at the age of 79. This was just, we're taping this on Thursday, so this was just yesterday that the news had come out. Pat died of cancer. He'd been suffering with that for some time. Pat Patterson, former WWF Intercontinental Champion, one of the great stars of the 60s and 70s, I should say. Pat started his career in Boston with Tony Santos way back in the early 60s. Pat had a tremendous run on the West Coast in San Francisco for promoter Roy Shires. He was United States champion. He and Ray Stevens were a tremendous tag team, the Blonde Bombers. They were the best tag team in the business in the 70s at that point. One of the premier workers in pro wrestling. In 79 came to the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, became the first Intercontinental Champion in that Phantom tournament in Rio de Janeiro. Pat Patterson, known as a brilliant mind for booking, a great mentor to many wrestlers, and a lot of pleasant memories of Pat as a fan. The alley fight against Sergeant Slaughter, which you can look up on YouTube, one of the great brawls of all time. Guys, your thoughts on Pat Patterson? Joe, why don't we start with you?
Well, it's funny because there were two matches, and I think we talked about this, that first introduced me to wrestling. One of them was Kevin Von Erich and Ric Flair. That was one of the first matches I ever saw on TV that hooked me. The next thing I saw was, what I found out later, was Pat Patterson interviewing Ivan Koloff. And Ivan Koloff smacked him. And Patterson went ballistic. Took the jacket off, started taking the shirt off, and he was doing commentary with Vince Jr. at the time. And he went after, and they were beeping him out. Now, as a kid, 12, 13 years old, watching this on television, I was hooked immediately. I'm like, what the heck just happened in front of me? This was amazing. And then fast forward, 20 some odd years, I end up sitting down in a bar right across from Pat Patterson when they were in town, and this was at the bar at the airport. I believe it was the Hilton that was there in Boston. And he's during the Attitude Era, and he's holding court with all these wrestlers around him, and I'm standing on the side with, I got Terry Reynolds on one side of me, Davey Boy Smith on the other, and there's Patterson doing, and he's yelling out Road Dogg's catchphrase, "Oh, you didn't know?" And he had the whole place going, everyone laughing and hooting it up, and he was the life of that night, the life of the party. And that was my only interaction with him. But man, what a talent, what a career, what an amazing man. Yep.
Kev.
Well, I was in Rio de Janeiro when he won the Intercontinental Championship.
Oh, that was you. Okay.
So seeing that live, still brings back those lives. Just like you guys were saying, it's just
insert pop here.
just it almost seems like he's one of the last of the brilliant minds in wrestling, to come up with the Royal Rumble, to come up with some of the most creative finishes, and that just seems to be a lost art now.
Right. Him, Dusty Rhodes, Kevin Sullivan, really the last of the bookers, and Jim Cornette. You got to throw in
one
there
of the
too,
really, one of the really sad things that I noticed yesterday when I got the news is, do you remember Legends House? That was on the network.
Right.
That was the reality show. Half that cast has passed away.
Wow.
There's a dose of reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sad. I met Pat many times. He would come to Cauliflower Alley he got honored as a surprise and burst into tears. So he became a very big booster of the Cauliflower Alley Club after that. Pat was a very, very encouraging to young wrestlers. He idolized Walter Kowalski and would come to a lot of Walter's shows and would critique the guys. Mike Hollow, who was our first champion, was good friends with Pat Patterson. That was a running joke for a long time, but nonetheless, Pat was very close with Mike. Pat was just one of the great talents. Anybody will tell you that when it comes to some of the greatest workers of all time, you got to rank Pat up there with any of them. As far as his in-ring work, he was a master. He was a master, whether it was tag team or singles. I remember that program with Ivan Koloff. That was great. The best one for my money, and look it up, is that Sergeant Slaughter Alley fight.
Yeah.
What a bloodbath that was. Unbelievable.
Yep. And it's crazy that there's a generation that only knows him as one of the Stooges from the Attitude Era.
Right. Exactly.
They don't realize that he, was in that match with Sergeant Slaughter, or that he had anything, to do behind the scenes, or, how good of a tag team wrestler he was.
Have either of you read his book?
No. I have it, but I haven't read it.
I don't have it. I'm meaning to get that. You'll have to let me know how it is. I heard very good things about it. It must have been difficult being a gay man in the pro wrestling business. He wasn't the first. I've heard people say that he was the first. It's not so. It was Jim Barnett before him. There were others, but again, that couldn't have been easy for Pat. But he was universally respected and well liked. I haven't heard too many people say bad things about Pat Patterson, except the ones that he wouldn't book. But of his contemporaries, he was always very, very well respected. I remember during the Ring Boy scandals in the 80s, how people that I knew who knew him would defend him to the hilt and say, that's not Pat. Pat wouldn't do anything like that.
Right.
There may have been others around who would have, but not Pat. But a sad loss for wrestling. Sad loss in Pat Patterson. Other news: United Wrestling Network's Primetime Live announced that they're on hiatus until the new year. They had last pay-per-view this past Tuesday night, which was again another good show. The reason for the hiatus is the situation in California with COVID-19. They had a couple of people that had to drop off the show because they had been exposed to the virus or to people who had the virus, and they didn't want to take the risk of putting them on the air. And they just decided discretion is the better part of valor. So my hat's off to Dave Marquez for that. And another thing that debuted this week, which goes along with this, is NWA Shockwave, which is a new YouTube series. And what that series actually consists of, and I did not know this when we talked about it last week, what they've done is they've taken some of the pay-per-view matches that involve the NWA talent and have edited them into this NWA Shockwave show. So this is, if you've missed these pay-per-views, you want to check out that NWA Shockwave. They had the Mike Bennett, Nick Aldis NWA title match as part of the first one, which was very, very good. So something to look out for. I'm glad that they're at least churning out some content, even though it's recycled from Primetime Live. It's still very good content and worth checking out. So there's that. And of course, when we were talking, Joe and I off the air, Kevin, about last night's AEW show, as we taped this on Thursday, so AEW aired last night. The return of Sting, debuting in AEW, and of course the big title change and angle at the end of the show between Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega, the new Impact Wrestling, not new Impact Wrestling, the new AEW champion, in some sort of a partnership with Impact Wrestling, as Don Callis figured into the finish. Don Callis, an executive with Impact Wrestling, figuring into the finish there. And Omega is going to appear on Impact Wrestling this coming Tuesday. And it appears that there's an arrangement between Impact Wrestling and AEW. So exciting stuff. This was the best AEW television show, I think, since they've gone on the air.
Kev, what do you think?
Well, right off the bat, you figure AEW has already had some sort of a working relationship with the NWA. They've been using a lot of the NWA talents.
Yep.
Now they seem to have a relationship with Impact.
Mm-hmm.
There's been rumors of them working on a relationship with New Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So, is it possible that there's going to be an event with all these companies working together?
Certainly is possible.
You know, I just think that...
The Godfather theory, let's get the 5 families together.
Right.
And sit at the head of the table.
But you know, it's... I think we're witnessing history yet again. You know, in something that nobody has even really thought. I mean, can you imagine even on like the independent level of 5 companies? Well, granted, all 5 companies would be using the same talent, but let's just say for the sake of the conversation that you have 5 companies with a distinctive roster putting a show together. There is no way that anyone's going to let someone get over on their guy.
Right.
You know, I just think that this opens up, you know, so much possibilities of dream matches, of, you know, a new era in pro wrestling. I also have to commend Tony Schiavone for the way he introduced Sting.
Yeah, I said the same thing earlier. Yep.
If you weren't excited about seeing him, Tony made you excited about seeing him.
Exactly.
Yes. Although reality does kick in. The guy is 61 years old.
And you know what? He got a better reaction than some of the guys that have been around the last 10 years.
This is
Look,
true.
they brought Mike Tyson in, and he did not get as good a reaction from ESPN and everything. So that just shows you how iconic that move was to bring Sting in.
Oh, absolutely. No question.
And if used right, you know, that 61-year-old guy doesn't have to do much.
He doesn't.
Well,
you know,
Sheldon and I were talking about this earlier. That 3 to 4 minute segment, not one word was spoken, but there was so much accomplished.
Yeah,
everything from it tied up. There was everything connected the dots. The history with Arn, the respect for Cody and Dustin for Dusty from him, and then the rub for Darby Allin. That look in their eyes said more, that he is more over now than anything else that kid has done in his entire career. And the sky is the limit for that kid if this thing's done the way it's going to be done. And bravo to them, man. Hats off, you know, standing ovation. Great. That's how pro wrestling is done.
Right.
That's the gift and the art of it right there.
I was much happier to see Sting because when I heard Winter is Coming, I thought it would have been the return of Glacier. So I saw the
don't diss Glacier. Ray's a great guy.
Right.
Not at all. I'm just saying, wouldn't that have been the perfect opportunity? Winter is coming.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, Santa Claus too. You know.
True.
We had Ray on the Mouthpiece Wrestling Show years back.
We did. What
a sweetheart of a guy.
Nice, hell of a trainer.
Oh yes. Yes.
Trained some great talents out there.
Right.
Yep, good guy. But no, the way they did it. This is the other thing too, and Sheldon and I were talking about this off air. If you saw how they did it, you got to look at how it was timed. The last commercial they did was before the 9 o'clock break, so that they could run through the 9 o'clock hour. Okay, so this was timed perfectly. You know, we were talking about how television's done, right? They knew what they were doing. They're up against NXT. So all of a sudden, if you watch, and my son said it to me, my son Nick, he's 18, he's smart. He goes, why did it take so long after his name popped up for him to come on? I said, because everyone in that audience, the first thing people do when they see they're texting it, they're Snapchatting it, they're throwing it on social media. Sting just showed up in AEW.
Yes.
So anybody who's not on the station is going to get hit on their phones with that, and guess what they're going to do? Click right over. and they're going to move right over to it. And guess what? By the time they got over to it, Sting is just coming out. And they're paced perfectly. And then the slow, methodical walk to the ring. It gave everybody enough time to tune in. And I can't wait to see what the ratings are going to be, because I'm sure they crushed that hour going into the 9 o'clock hour. Right?
They did.
Yeah,
they did almost 1 million people.
Oh, see, come on.
Yeah.
How perfect. That's their best. This was their best show since the debut.
Yes.
And one of the things to consider, too, is because they you can't have that many fans, they were able to keep it a secret.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's one of the, I guess, if you have to try to find a silver lining, the fact that there aren't as much spoilers out there anymore, because everything is closed sets. There aren't that many people peeking around that can I don't know.
But those 1,000 people that were in there sounded like 10,000.
Yeah.
And when they showed them, there were people jumping up and down. Look, I'm 50 years old. I was sitting there, my arms jumped right up in the air. I went, I don't believe this, because they timed it perfect. I'm like, this is how they do it. This is how you get it done. There were people jumping around like little kids. It was Sting.
Yeah.
How perfect of an opportunity they have now to have him there. And we were talking about how limited he may be and what can he do. But like, again, they just set up an 8-man match, an 8-man to a 6-man anyway. You know what I mean? And Sting can easily be hidden in a 6-man. Come in, hit his greatest hits, get out, done.
Taz
wait for that hot tag. Well, last I had heard, Taz wasn't able to do much until all of a sudden he grabbed Cody. Now Taz's son is coming up. So there's the comeuppance could be happening for his son.
Right.
If Taz can't bump, you know what I mean? Taz has some issues that, from what I hear, have been pretty substantial, and he can't get very physical. That doesn't mean that he can't get better. Look at Daniel Bryan.
Right.
And time off heals all wounds. And Sting, the last documentary he did, was alluding to the fact that he may have one more match in him. And maybe it won't be The Undertaker, but he just signed a multi-year deal, and I'm sure it's got a few zeros on it.
Oh yeah.
With AEW. And just his mind and what he can bring to the table alone, is fantastic. And perception.
And star power.
What I mean? Star power. Well, when you're pitching AEW to other media type things, and you've got Sting, that's a common household name right there.
Absolutely.
So smart on Tony Khan's part,
and especially to be back on TNT.
Right. Exactly. Where he basically got it. He cut his teeth there.
Yeah.
It was perfect. It was dynamite. Now let's talk about with the whole, Omega, the whole, how slow build was that with Callis coming in the last few weeks during his matches, because this wasn't the first time he ever called a match.
Right.
He's come in because he's been friends with him, and Omega's uncle trained Callis, and
he was there for Jericho's 30th.
Right. So they moved. You know what? That's what else is missing in this business is the pacing. Everybody wants to rush things. Everyone wants to. When you slow pace something like that, you've taken the element of surprise away. So when you do surprise them, it's an actual surprise. You're actually like, oh, son of a! I couldn't believe I didn't see that coming, because they duped me.
And long-term storytelling works.
Right. According to Dave Meltzer, this has been in the works for months. So, which also makes sense, because you got to figure that in order to pull something like this off, a partnership of this level, it takes some negotiating, and everything has to be figured out ahead of time, so there are no surprises.
Sure.
But no, I think it's a brilliant move for Impact Wrestling. You can bet that their show Tuesday is going to be the highest rated show they've ever done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, what are you looking forward to, Sheldon, in this? With this
I'm hoping
mashup.
I'm hoping that a lot of that Impact roster gets a chance to be seen on TNT. I mean, I think it'd be great for Eddie Edwards to be seen on TNT. That's who I thought of immediately. Wouldn't it be great for that kid to get a higher level of exposure, because Access is not anywhere near the level of exposure that TNT is.
No. But let Eddie go up against Darby Allin for that TNT title.
Sure.
There's a dream match right there. You know, what if the Good Brothers come in and jump back with Omega?
Yeah.
And now you just reform the Bullet Club.
Right.
Yeah, there's so many possibilities.
Absolutely. And it's just, if I'm Anthem, the owners of Access TV and Impact Wrestling, Don Callis got to get a raise.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Don Callis.
Pulling this off?
Yeah. Oh, my God.
Or at least a better parking spot.
Right. At the very least. Better food and catering.
Yeah. And you know, Callis and Jericho were the two most important people in this entire thing. They've been best friends for so long,
right.
And you know they wanted to make this work. And they found, like you said, it's tough trying to get people to put their egos aside with whose company, this is my company, and I want my people to shine. And all.
Well, don't forget, Omega's a vice president, so he's an executive.
Yep.
You know, these guys are in the boardroom too, so it's not like it's just a wrestler's idea.
No. Nope. But be able to put this together and be able to be on the same page and do for the better of the business.
Right.
This is only going to make everybody else, like you said, the NWA. We didn't even talk about Thunder Rosa. If half of this stuff didn't happen, she'd be the number one thing we'd be talking about right now, with her jumping in, because she's phenomenal.
Yep.
But now there's the NWA element. We haven't talked. We still have unfinished business with Cody and Nick Aldis. There's a rubber match left. You know what I mean, for that NWA title. There's still unfinished business there that needs to be taken care of. This is a good. You know what? The only thing that's missing, and we saw it in the Crown Jewels Guy Alexander Mike Bennett match, is that crowd. Listening to that crowd made me really wish we had a crowd for that. Like a crowd like that. That's that hot, you know what I mean? And by the time this all finally comes to fruition and we get maybe that super card that we were talking about,
right?
Let's hope we're all back in that same crowd place.
Let's hope so. Yeah. There's another topic that we're going to get to on another show, and that is how all of this affects independent wrestling, because it does affect it, believe it or not. I mean, it's going to be a lot harder for companies like ours to get traction and get a foothold and so forth because of the market conditions. And I see WWE just announced a new class for their performance center. They're still pulling people out of the independents. With no independent wrestling, or very limited independent wrestling, that's a source of talent that is going to take a hit.
Right.
And to bring that back, I mean, there's a lot of issues. As I say, we'll get more in depth on it on another show, but it's possible that venues might become an issue. A lot of these small places might have gone under because of the COVID restrictions and not being able to have crowds, not being able to have audiences. So there's a lot of issues that need to be addressed on our end of the business. So we'll. But
with these issues also come opportunities.
That's true. That is very true, and. I think there is a very bright future for people like us, assuming that we can marshal the resources to get it done, and I think we will eventually be able to do that.
Yeah, Kevin and I have talked about this before. It would be better to only have look at how many federations or groups were here in New England. You know what I mean? If you got rid of, and there was only maybe 2, maybe 3, if you will, you know what I mean? That's it. That people could actually run. It could be very good. You might eliminate some of these, the outlaw groups, or these little, rinky-dink groups.
No, you'll never eliminate them. As long as there's wrestlers, they're going to want to wrestle.
But if they're going to want to wrestle for that, look, you may eliminate some of these pimply-faced promoters out there that may just, fade away because they don't know what they're doing.
Well, they won't fade away. They'll just go further underground.
It's even better.
Yeah.
Let them burrow.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it just leaves more of an opportunity.
All right. Well, before we go, I should say, Joe, you had something you wanted to bring up here. You had
I do. So, Sheldon, we've been working on a few things. I've got a lot of friends that are out there, and you've met a couple of them. Mm-hmm. Very, very good friends of mine and my family's. Ferry Hill Center over in Marshfield is a campground. It used to be the old YWCA over in Marshfield. It's a campground for autistic kids where they can go. They can have a normal setting of a campground, and it's geared towards kids with autism. They're looking to raise money. You can find them on Facebook, the Ferry Hill Center. We're actually working with them. Sheldon, you and I have talked about it. Just before COVID hit, we were in the process of putting together a show that we could do to help raise money. But in the meantime, they still need money now just to keep the everyday ongoing. They haven't been able to run because of COVID. You know, the restrictions have been there for them, but they need upkeep. They need anything from money to tradesmen. If there are tradesmen out there that can help out, anything, even landscaping, anything like that could be done, small carpentry, little plumbing issues, just general maintenance stuff that they could be looking for. You can find them on Facebook. I'm trying to find the actual, it's the Ferry Hill Center. You can't miss it when you go look it up and find them. They're out of Marshfield. There's a link there on their Facebook page to donate, where you can donate whatever you can for them. It's kind of a long link. Otherwise, I'd give it to you. It's just easier just to find them on Facebook.
What we'll do is we'll put that link in the description of this podcast so people will be able to find it. And we'll put it on our social media. We'll get it out there.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that.
We'd be happy to
again, they're friends of the family, and they're fantastic people. They do such a great service, and we'll be doing more with them in the future.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you all for listening. We're going to wrap it up for this week. 2 more matches we're going to discuss next week. We're down to the last 4 matches in the 20th anniversary collection. And once again, we want to thank you for listening. We want to remind you, if you have questions for us, please send them in to us, regenerationnecw@gmail.com. For Joe Matarazzo and Kevin Castro, I'm Sheldon Goldberg. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.
The Regeneration Podcast is a production of New England Championship Wrestling. To send us questions, comments, or feedback, email us at regenerationnecw@gmail.com.